My name is Helena Brooks, and if there's one thing I learned too late in life, it's that betrayal rarely arrives like a storm. No, sometimes it arrives quietly, in small sacrifices, in little excuses, in the way a man slowly stops looking at you while still saying, "I love you." And by the time you finally see the truth, you're already standing in the ruins of the life you built for him. I'm 56 years old now, but this story began when I was 48, back when I still believed loyalty meant something, back when I thought marriage was about building together, back when I would have burned my own hands just to keep my husband warm. His name was Victor. Tall, charismatic, smooth voice, the kind of man who could walk into a room and make strangers trust him within minutes. When we met, he had nothing, and I don't say that cruelly. I say it factually. He was working at a tiny electronics repair shop in downtown Chicago, making barely enough to survive. His apartment had peeling wallpaper and a mattress on the floor. But he had dreams, big dreams. He used to sit across from me at our little kitchen table, eyes glowing while talking about owning his own business. "Just one chance, Lena," he'd whisper. "If somebody believed in me, I know I could make it." And I believed him. God help me, I believed every word. At the time, I worked as a nurse assistant at St. Mary's Hospital. Long shifts, sore feet, double weekends. But I was steady, responsible, the kind of woman who paid bills before buying herself shoes. Victor used to kiss my forehead and say I was the foundation of his future. I wore those words like jewelry. We got married after 3 years together. Nothing extravagant. A small ceremony, cheap flowers, one chocolate cake. But I remember looking at him that day and thinking, I would follow this man anywhere. And for a long time, I did. The first years weren't terrible. We struggled, yes, but we struggled together. Or at least, that's what I thought. When Victor lost his job, I worked overtime. When his car broke down, I sold jewelry my mother left me. When he wanted to take business courses at night, I paid the tuition. And every time I sacrificed something, he'd hold my face gently and say, "One day, I'll repay you for everything." I never asked him to, because when you love someone deeply, their success feels like your success. At least that's what I believed back then. Then came the dream. Victor wanted to open a custom furniture business. He had sketches everywhere, dining tables, luxury shelves, handmade office desks. He talked about craftsmanship like it was art. And honestly, he was talented. But talent isn't enough to start a business. You need money. A lot of it. Money we absolutely did not have. I still remember the night he brought it up. Rain hammered against the windows while I reheated soup for dinner. Victor sat quietly at the table. Too quietly. I knew that look. "Talk to me," I said. He rubbed his hands together nervously. "I found a workshop space." I smiled softly. "That's good. It's perfect, Lena." His voice trembled. Then came the silence, the dangerous kind. Finally, he whispered, "I just need startup money." My stomach tightened instantly. "How much?" He swallowed. 80,000. I nearly dropped the spoon. $80,000. At that point in our lives, that number sounded impossible. We had savings, yes, but nowhere near enough. Victor quickly started talking. Fast, hopeful, desperate. This could change our lives. I already talked to suppliers. I know I can make this work. And then came the sentence that destroyed me years later. I can't do it without you. God, that sentence. Women like me hear those words and turn themselves into bridges for men to walk across. That night I barely slept. I stayed at the ceiling for hours, thinking, calculating, praying. By morning, I made my decision. I refinanced my house. The house my father helped me buy before he died. The house that carried every memory of safety I had left. I refinanced it for Victor. When I handed him the bank papers, he cried. Actually cried. Wrapped his arms around me. You believe in me that much? I smiled. Always. He kissed me like I was the greatest woman alive. And for a little while, I truly was. The business exploded faster than either of us expected. Within 2 years, Brooks Custom Interiors became successful, then very successful. Luxury clients, restaurants, hotels, corporate contracts. Money started flowing. Real money. For the first time in my life, I stopped checking grocery prices before putting things in the cart. Victor transformed during those years. At first, I thought it was confidence. Then I realized it was distance. He started dressing differently. Designer watches, Italian shoes, expensive cologne. He became obsessed with appearances. Phone always face down. Late meetings. Weekend networking events. And yet every time I questioned him, he made me feel guilty. You know how hard I work. This business is for us. You're being paranoid. So I ignored the uneasiness growing inside me. Women often do that, especially women who have invested too much to admit they might have made a mistake. Then came the first crack. One evening, I visited the workshop unexpectedly. I wanted to surprise him with dinner. His assistant looked startled when I arrived. "Oh, Mr. Brooks left already." I frowned. He told me he was here finishing inventory. The assistant hesitated. Too long. Then forced a smile. He must have stepped out. Something cold slid through me. Not proof. Not certainty. Just instinct. The female instinct men love calling crazy until it turns out to be right. Victor came home 3 hours later, smelling like perfume. Not mine. When I asked where he'd been, he laughed. "You're imagining things." Then he kissed my forehead absent-mindedly and went to shower. That night, I cried silently beside him while he slept, because deep down, I already knew. But knowing and accepting are two different things, and I wasn't ready yet. Months passed. More distance, more lies, more unexplained absences. And yet somehow, he still managed to make me feel like the problem. "You've changed, Helena. You're always suspicious. You don't support me anymore." Imagine sacrificing your entire life for someone, only for them to accuse you of failing them. One Saturday morning, I decided to clean his office at home. Not because I was searching. I swear to God I wasn't. I was dusting shelves when a receipt slipped from a folder. A jewelry receipt. Diamond earrings. $4,200. My heart stopped. Not because of the money. Because the date was 2 weeks earlier. My birthday. And he had given me nothing that day except a rushed hug and flowers from a gas station. My fingers shook violently. I searched the folder further, and found another receipt. A hotel. Then another. Wine bar. Spa reservation. Everything paid with the business account. Our business. My money. My sacrifice. My house. I felt physically sick. When Victor came home, I confronted him immediately. I laid the receipts on the kitchen counter. He froze for exactly 1 second, then recovered. Too fast. They're for clients. I stayed at him. Diamond earrings are for clients. Yes. You bought another woman jewelry. His face hardened instantly. You're acting insane. That word. Insane. Men love using it when women get too close to the truth. I remember whispering, "Are you cheating on me?" And instead of answering, he got angry. That was the moment something inside me began dying. Because innocent people usually deny. Guilty people attack. For the next few weeks, the tension became unbearable. Victor barely touched me anymore. Barely looked at me. He started sleeping with his back turned toward me. And every night I lay awake wondering how a man could build a life on top of someone else's devotion, then slowly erase them from it. Then came the night that changed everything. I'll never forget it. It was a Thursday, cold outside. Victor claimed he had an overnight business trip in Milwaukee. Something inside me snapped. No screaming, no dramatic scene, just clarity, the kind that arises after months of silent suffering. I waited 30 minutes after he left. Then I got in my car and followed him. My hands trembled on the steering wheel the entire drive. Part of me prayed I was wrong, prayed this would all look ridiculous later. But Victor never headed toward the highway. Instead, he drove downtown, to a luxury apartment building. I parked across the street. My heartbeat was so loud I could barely breathe. Then I saw her. Young, beautiful, long dark hair, maybe 30 years old. She walked out of the building smiling. And Victor, my husband, kissed her. Not casually, not quickly. No, like a man in love. I felt something too inside my chest. Physically, like grief becoming flesh. Then came the final blow. She laughed and wrapped her arms around him before saying, "Are you staying all weekend this time?" All weekend. My vision blurred instantly. Victor smiled. "Of course, baby." Baby. Not Helena. Not his wife of 20 years. Baby. Then they disappeared into the building together, and I sat in my car staring at the entrance for nearly an hour, unable to move, unable to think. Do you know what's strange about heartbreak? The world keeps going. Cars still pass. People still laugh. Streetlights still change colors, even while your entire life collapses silently inside you. Eventually I drove home, numb. Not crying, not screaming, just empty. I walked through the front door slowly, the same house I nearly lost to finance's dreams, and for the first time, it no longer felt like home. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in darkness replaying every sacrifice I'd made, every overtime shift, every postponed dream, every excuse. Every lie I ignored because I loved him more than I loved myself. Then around 4 a.m., I made a decision. If Victor wanted to destroy the woman who built him, he was about to discover exactly who she really was. And for the first time in years, I stopped being afraid. People think revenge begins with anger. It doesn't. Not real revenge. Real revenge begins with silence. With clarity, with the moment your tears dry up and something colder takes their place. The morning after I followed Victor to that apartment, he came home smiling, like he hadn't shattered 20 years of my life the night before. I was sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee when he walked in, calm, controlled, still wearing the same expensive coat he used when pretending to be successful. He kissed the top of my head casually. Morning. Morning. I looked at him carefully, really looked at him, and suddenly I realized something terrifying. I no longer recognized this man. Not emotionally, Not spiritually, not even physically. It was like watching a stranger wear my husband's face. "You're home early," I said quietly. He loosened his tie. "Meeting got cancelled." Lie. Such an easy lie. So smooth. So practiced. And the worst part, I finally understood this wasn't new. Men don't become professional liars overnight. No. They rehearse on small deceptions first. Late meetings, hidden receipts, locked phones, tiny betrayals that grow until deception becomes second nature. Victor poured himself coffee while checking his phone, smiling at messages, probably his, and I sat there realizing something else. I had spent years fighting to save a marriage that only one person was inside. That realization hurt more than the cheating itself, because betrayal is one thing, but discovering someone stopped loving you long before you noticed, that destroys your sense of reality. Still, I said nothing. Not yet. Victor glanced at me suspiciously. "You okay?" I almost laughed. Instead I nodded. "Just tired." "Well, try not to stress so much." Stress. Imagine being cheated on by the man you financed into success, and being told not to stress. I watched him leave for work 30 minutes later. The moment the door closed, I moved. Not emotionally, strategically, because here's something women learn too late. Love may be emotional, but survival is business. And Victor had turned our marriage into business the moment he started spending my sacrifices on another woman. So I opened my laptop. Then I started digging. The first thing I discovered nearly made me vomit. The apartment downtown wasn't rented. It was owned. By Victor. Purchased 18 months earlier through an LLC. 18 months. That meant while he was kissing me goodnight, he was building another life elsewhere. I kept searching. The bills for the apartment were tied to the business account. Brooks Custom Interiors, the company I financed. The company legally registered under both our names. My stomach twisted violently. He wasn't just cheating. He was funding his affair with marital assets. Our money, my house equity, my labor, my years, and somehow, that betrayal cut even deeper. I spent the entire afternoon gathering documents, bank statements, tax returns, business filings, property records, and the more I uncovered, the uglier the truth became. Victor had been moving money quietly for years, small amounts at first, then larger ones, luxury purchases, travel expenses, private dining, jewelry, spa retreats, designer bags, thousands upon thousands of dollars, all while claiming the business needed careful budgeting. Meanwhile, I was still shopping sales at grocery stores, still reusing old handbags, still postponing dental work because the business comes first. I felt humiliated, not because another woman existed, but because I had allowed myself to become invisible inside my own marriage. That evening Victor came home carrying flowers, bright red roses. I stared at them in disbelief. Maybe guilt inspired him, or maybe he sensed the shift in me. "You seem distant," he said softly. Distant. I almost admired his audacity. He handed me the bouquet with that same charming smile that once made me weak. "I thought we could have dinner together tonight." There it was again. That performance. That carefully crafted version of loving husband. And suddenly I saw it clearly. Victor didn't love women. He managed them. Like investments. Like emotional employees. Give them enough attention to keep them useful. The realization chilled me. Still, I smiled gently. "Dinner sounds nice." His shoulders relaxed instantly. He thought I knew nothing. Good. That was exactly what I wanted. Because while Victor was busy maintaining his lies, I was preparing war. The next morning, I visited a lawyer. Her name was Denise Carter. Sharp eyes. No nonsense. The kind of woman who had probably seen every ugly side of marriage. I sat across from her, trembling slightly as I explained everything. The cheating, the business, the apartment, the hidden expenses. Denise listened quietly while taking notes. Then she leaned back. Whose credit financed the business startup? Mine. The house. My name before marriage. And the business registration. Joint ownership. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. Interesting. Very interesting. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of power return. Denise explained that because marital assets had been used to support an extramarital relationship, Victor could face serious financial consequences during divorce proceedings. Especially since I had proof. Lots of proof. She looked directly at me. Mrs. Brooks, your husband may believe he built this empire himself. Her lips tightened slightly. But legally speaking, you built it together. Together. That word hurt, because emotionally, we had stopped being together long ago. Still, he was about to learn something many selfish people forget. The quiet partner often holds the foundation, and when the foundation moves, everything cracks. Over the following weeks, I became someone new. Or maybe I became who I should have been all along. I stopped crying, stopped begging emotionally in my mind, stopped replaying memories searching for meaning. Instead, I observed. Victor became almost cheerful during that period, probably because he believed he'd succeeded. Men like him love comfort, a loyal wife at home, excitement somewhere else, an audience in every room. And because I stopped questioning him, he became careless, very careless. Late-night texts, weekend disappearances, secretive calls from the balcony. One evening I overheard him laughing softly on the phone. I miss you too. Pause. Soon, baby. I promise. Baby again. I sat silently in the living room while rage crawled slowly beneath my skin. Not explosive rage. Worse. Controlled rage. The kind that sharpens you. Then fate handed me something unexpected. One Friday afternoon, Victor accidentally left his tablet at home. It buzzed repeatedly while he was gone. I tried ignoring it. I really did. But eventually, I looked, and there she was, Vanessa, 29 years old, yoga instructor, perfect hair, perfect smile, perfect skin, the kind of woman aging wives fear men secretly want. Except this wasn't imagination anymore. It was real. Their messages made my blood run cold, not just because they were intimate, because of how cruelly he spoke about me. She still thinks I'm working late, LOL. She's too boring to notice anything. Once the restructuring is done, I'll leave her comfortably. Comfortably. As if I was some outdated employee receiving retirement compensation. But the next message shattered me completely. Vanessa wrote, "Did she really pay for everything in the beginning?" Victor responded, "She was useful back then." Useful. I physically stopped breathing for a second. Useful. 20 years. Sacrifice. Loyalty. Devotion. Reduced to usefulness. I cannot fully explain what that word did to me. It erased every remaining ounce of love I still carried. And strangely, that was freeing. Because grief tied to love is heavy. But grief without love becomes clarity. That night, Victor came home expecting dinner. Instead, he found me sitting quietly in the dark living room. "You scared me," he laughed nervously. "Good." I wanted him nervous. He loosened his tie. "You okay?" I looked directly at him. For the first time in months. He looked away first. Interesting. Predators dislike eye contact once prey stops acting weak. "We need to talk soon," I said calmly. His face tightened instantly. "About what?" "Oh, everything." The color drained slightly from his face, and I realized something important. Victor wasn't afraid of hurting me. He was afraid of consequences. There's a difference. The next week, Denise filed quietly, strategically, carefully. We froze certain business transfers, documented financial misuse, protected the house, prepared claims. Victor still knew nothing. And during those days, I began noticing things about myself. Small things. I started sleeping again, started eating properly, started listening to music while driving. It was as though the constant emotional confusion had lifted from my body. Pain remained, but confusion disappeared, and clarity is powerful. Then came the moment everything exploded. Sunday evening. Rain outside. Victor sitting at the dining table scrolling through his phone. I walked in carrying a folder. His eyes lifted casually. "What's that?" I placed the folder in front of him. Slowly, he opened it, and the moment he saw the first page, his entire face changed. Property records, bank transfers, hotel receipts, photos, printouts of messages, the apartment, Vanessa, everything. Victor went pale instantly. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then finally, "You went through my things." Not apology, not remorse, accusation. Classic. I laughed softly, a tired laugh. "You built another life with my money." His jaw tightened. "It's not what you think." I leaned forward slowly. "Then explain it." Silence. Victor rubbed his temples aggressively. "It just happened. Just happened. As though affairs grow naturally like mold in dark corners. You told her I was useful." His eyes widened instantly. Ah, that one scared him. He stood abruptly. "You invaded my privacy." Privacy. Imagine betraying your wife for years and demanding privacy. I stared at him quietly. Then I asked the question that had haunted me for months. "When did you stop loving me?" That question hit him harder than the financial documents. Because for 1 second, his mask slipped, and underneath all the arrogance, there was cowardice. Victor sat down heavily. "I don't know." That answer hurt more than I expected. Not because it was cruel, because it was honest. Somewhere along the way, he simply stopped choosing me, stopped seeing me, stopped valuing the woman who built his life. And instead of leaving honestly, he consumed me slowly while building another future behind my back. I nodded slowly. Then I slid divorce papers across the table. His eyes widened. "Helena!" "No." My voice surprised even me. Calm, cold, final. "You don't get to say my name like you still know me." For the first time in our entire marriage, Victor looked afraid. Real fear. Not guilt. Fear. Because suddenly he understood something. The woman he thought would tolerate everything was gone. And in her place stood someone he could no longer control. "You're overreacting," he snapped suddenly. There he was, the real Victor, anger replacing charm. "You're throwing away 20 years over one mistake." One mistake. I stared at him in disbelief. A 2-year affair is not one mistake. His face hardened. You don't understand what pressure does to a man. Pressure. Interesting. Because apparently my overtime shifts, financial sacrifices, emotional labor, and constant support never counted as pressure. Only his did. You used me, I whispered. Victor scoffed dramatically. That's ridiculous. Was I ever enough for you? He hesitated. That hesitation answered everything. And somehow, that hurt even worse than the affair itself. Because women like me don't fear aging. We fear becoming invisible. Victor finally exploded. You want the truth. I stayed silent. You stopped trying, Helena. That sentence landed like a slap. He pointed aggressively around the house. You became comfortable. You stopped caring about yourself. You lived like an old woman before you even got old. Every word cut deeper than the last. Not because they were true, because I had once feared they were. And manipulators know exactly where your insecurities live. But then, something unexpected happened. I looked at him carefully, really carefully, and instead of shame, I felt pity, because this man standing before me, this angry, selfish, aging man desperately chasing youth through another woman, was deeply empty. Vanessa wasn't his soulmate. She was his mirror, proof he still mattered, proof he was still desirable, proof he hadn't become ordinary. And suddenly I realized, his betrayal had never been about my worth. It was about his weakness. That realization freed me completely. Victor kept talking angrily, blaming, deflecting, excusing. But emotionally, I was already gone. Finally, I stood up. You should pack a bag. His face twisted. This is my house too. I smiled faintly. No, Victor. I looked around slowly. This is the house I saved while you were busy financing your fantasy. For the first time in 20 years, he had nothing clever to say. And as I walked upstairs that night, I realized something extraordinary. The woman who once would have died to keep her marriage alive had finally chosen herself. There's a moment after betrayal, a strange moment, where the pain stops feeling sharp, not because you've healed, but because your soul becomes exhausted from carrying grief for too long. That's where I was after Victor and I separated. Exhausted, not broken anymore. Just tired. Tired of lies. Tired of replaying memories. Tired of wondering why I wasn't enough for a man who had never truly appreciated anything placed in his hands. Victor moved into the luxury apartment with Vanessa 3 days after our confrontation. 3 days, 20 years of marriage, packed into 3 suitcases. I watched from the upstairs window as he loaded his car silently. No dramatic goodbye, no tears, no final attempt to save us. And honestly, that hurt too, because part of me had still hoped he would fight for the life we built. Instead, he looked relieved, like a man finally removing a heavy coat. When he drove away, the house became painfully quiet. You'd think I would have collapsed emotionally at that point. But strangely, I didn't. I just stood there staring at the empty driveway while morning sunlight hit the porch, and for the first time in years, I could breathe without tension sitting inside my chest. That frightened me, because peace should not arrive through someone's absence. Yet there it was, quiet, gentle, real. The first weeks alone were strange. I kept expecting to hear Victor's keys at the door, kept waking up automatically at 6 a.m. to make coffee for 2, kept cooking too much food. That's the cruel thing about long marriages. Even after love dies, habits survive. and habits haunt you. But slowly, the house began changing. Or maybe I did. I opened windows more often, played music again, rearranged furniture Victor always complained about. I painted the dining room sage green because I liked it, not because it matched some expensive designer trend he preferred. Tiny things, small freedoms. But every little decision reminded me of something painful. I had spent years shrinking myself to accommodate a man who still betrayed me anyway. That realization stayed with me constantly. Meanwhile, the divorce became uglier, much uglier. The moment Victor realized Denise had documented the financial misuse tied to his affair, his attitude changed completely. Suddenly the charming businessman disappeared, and underneath was entitlement, pure entitlement. He called me repeatedly, at first calmly, then angrily, then desperately. "You're trying to destroy me." Destroy him. Interesting word. As if exposing betrayal is somehow worse than committing it. One afternoon he stormed into the house without warning. His face looked different already. More tired, more tense. Success had always looked good on him. Consequences did not. "We need to settle this privately," he snapped. I remained calm. "No, you're being vindictive." "No, Victor." I looked him directly in the eye. "I'm being fair." He laughed bitterly. "Fair? After everything I gave you?" That sentence nearly took my breath away. Because men like Victor genuinely rewrite history inside their minds. Somehow he had convinced himself that he created our life alone, that my sacrifices were simply expected, invisible, automatic. I folded my arms quietly. "What exactly did you give me?" His jaw tightened instantly. "You had a good life." "No." I shook my head slowly. "You had a good life." Silence. That silence exposed everything. Victor began pacing aggressively through the living room. "You're embarrassing me in front of investors." I almost smiled. There it was. Not heartbreak, not regret. Reputation. That was what truly mattered to him. "How unfortunate," I said softly. He stopped pacing. "You know what your problem is." I looked at him calmly. "You finally realized I'm not weak anymore." His face darkened instantly, and for one terrifying second, I saw genuine hatred in his eyes. Not because I hurt him, because I stopped serving him. People rarely talk about this truth. Some relationships survive only because one person accepts being emotionally consumed. The moment they stop, the entire dynamic collapses. Victor stepped closer. "You think anybody's going to want you now?" Ah, there it was, the oldest weapon in the world. Fear. Fear of aging. Fear of loneliness. Fear of becoming undesirable. And years earlier, that sentence would have shattered me. But now, I simply looked at him with pity. Because imagine needing to destroy someone's self-worth just to feel powerful. What a miserable way to exist. "I'd rather be alone," I whispered, "than loved conditionally." Something flickered across his face then. Not remorse, recognition. For the first time, Victor realized he no longer controlled my emotions. And manipulative people panic when emotional control disappears. He left shortly afterward, slamming the door hard enough to shake the walls. I sat there quietly after he left, hands trembling slightly, not from fear, from release. 20 years, 20 years of emotional accommodation, gone, and somehow I survived it. The following month, things became public, very public. One of Victor's business partners discovered the affair-related financial misuse. Then rumors spread. Clients started asking questions. Investors became nervous. And suddenly Brooks Custom Interiors, the company Victor treated like his kingdom, began cracking under pressure. Not because of me, because deception eventually poisons everything it touches. Victor blamed me? Of course. He sent furious texts constantly. You ruined my reputation. You destroyed the business. You turned people against me. But deep down, he knew the truth. His own choices destroyed him. I simply stopped protecting him from consequences. Around that time, Denise called with an update. We met at her office downtown. She slid documents across the desk calmly. Victor's been attempting unauthorized transfers. I stared at her. What does that mean? It means he's panicking. Apparently Victor had tried moving funds through secondary accounts tied to the business. Desperate attempts to protect assets before settlement. And because Denise anticipated this, she had already prepared emergency legal blocks. I leaned back slowly. The man I once trusted with my entire future was now trying to hide money from me. It's strange how betrayal transforms memory. Suddenly old moments look different. You begin questioning everything. Was he always selfish? Or did success rot him slowly? Was the love real once? Or was I simply convenient from the beginning? Those questions haunted me for weeks. Then one evening, I got my answer unexpectedly. I ran into Martin, an old friend of Victor's. We were at a grocery store when he approached awkwardly. Helena! I smiled politely. Martin! He looked uncomfortable immediately. The kind of uncomfortable people become when they know ugly truths. Finally he sighed heavily. I'm sorry. For what? He hesitated, then quietly said, I should have told you years ago. My stomach dropped instantly. Years ago. Years. Martin explained that Victor's behavior with women had escalated after the business became successful. Flirting first, then affairs during trade conventions, then eventually Vanessa. Apparently many people around Victor suspected things long before I did. Some even knew. Do you know what hurts almost as much as betrayal? Realizing other people pitied you while you were still fighting for the relationship. I thanked Martin politely and left quickly before crying in public. That night I sat alone on my patio wrapped in a blanket. The air smelled like rain, and for the first time since everything collapsed, I allowed myself to grieve fully, not just the marriage, the woman I used to be, the woman who believed loyalty guaranteed safety, the woman who thought love automatically inspired respect. I cried for hours that night. Deep, ugly grief. The kind that empties your body completely. But afterward, something shifted. Because grief finally expressed becomes lighter. And once that weight lifted, space opened for something else. For me, a few weeks later, I did something I hadn't done in years. I booked a trip, alone. Just 3 days near the coast in Maine. Nothing extravagant, but standing near the ocean that first morning, watching waves crash endlessly against rocks, I realized how small I had allowed my life to become. For decades my world revolved around Victor, his dreams, his needs, his moods, his ambitions. Meanwhile my own identity quietly starved. I had forgotten what Helena even wanted. That realization was painful, but also exciting. Because maybe life wasn't ending. Maybe it was finally beginning. When I returned home, I started changing more things. I joined a painting class, started walking every morning, bought clothes because I liked them, not because they looked appropriate. And slowly, I began seeing myself differently, not as abandoned, not as rejected, but as reborn. That's the thing nobody tells women after heartbreak. Once the grief fades, you sometimes discover freedom hiding underneath it. Then came the call. 6 months after Victor left. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. His voice sounded rough instantly. Helena. Not baby, not sweetheart, just Helena. Tired, defeated. I stayed silent. Then he exhaled shakily. Can we meet? Every instinct screamed no, but another part of me needed closure. So we met at a quiet cafe downtown, and when Victor walked in, I barely recognized him. He looked older, much older, gray around the temples, dark circles beneath his eyes, the arrogance that once filled every room around him. Gone. He sat carefully across from me. For several seconds neither of us spoke. Then finally he whispered, "You look good." I did. Not younger, not magically transformed, but peaceful. And peace changes people. Why are we here? I asked calmly. Victor stared down at his hands, then quietly admitted, "Vanessa left." I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No jealousy. Nothing. She said I was emotionally unavailable. The irony almost made me laugh. Imagine destroying your marriage for someone, only to discover you bring the same emptiness everywhere you go. Victor rubbed his face tiredly. The business is struggling. I nodded once. I heard. Silence again. Then he looked directly at me, and for the first time in years, his mask disappeared completely. No charm, no manipulation, just regret, real regret. I made a mistake. A mistake. That word again. Still too small for the damage done. But this time, he actually sounded broken. I thought success would make me happy, he admitted quietly. But nothing's felt right since you left. I studied him carefully, and suddenly I understood something important. Victor didn't miss me because he loved deeply. He missed me because I had been the only stable thing in his life, the only person who truly believed in him before success arrived. And once he destroyed that, everything else became hollow. You didn't just betray me, I said softly. You betrayed the only person who would have stood beside you through anything. His eyes filled slightly. I know. That answer almost hurt, because years earlier, those words would have meant everything to me. But timing matters. Apologies arrive too late more often than people admit. Victor reached across the table slightly. I want another chance. And there it was. The moment movies romanticize, the fallen man returning, the broken husband finally understanding his wife's value. But real life is not fantasy. Sometimes love dies permanently, and sometimes respect cannot be rebuilt once destroyed. I looked at him gently, not angrily, not bitterly, just honestly. You loved me most when I was sacrificing myself for you. His face crumpled slightly, but the moment I needed honesty. I shook my head softly. You chose someone else. Tears gathered in his eyes. Actual tears. Strange how men often cry hardest when consequences become permanent. I was stupid. Yes, I whispered. You were. He looked shattered hearing me say it. But I wasn't cruel. I was truthful, and after years of emotional manipulation, truth became sacred to me. Victor lowered his head. I still love you. I believed he believed that. But love without loyalty is merely appetite, and I had confused the two for too long. Finally, I stood slowly. He looked up immediately, panic flickering across his face. Helena! I smiled sadly. I forgive you, Victor. Relief flooded his expression instantly. Then I continued, but forgiveness doesn't mean access. His face fell. I hope one day you become the man you pretended to be when we met. Tay slid down his face silently, and for a moment I mourned him, not the husband he became, the man I once thought he was. Then I walked away, not dramatically, not angrily, just peacefully, and as I stepped outside into the cool evening air, I realized something extraordinary. Victor had spent years believing he was the prize, but in the end, the real loss was never mine. It was his, because he traded unconditional love for temporary validation. And by the time he understood the difference, the woman who built his world had already learned how to live without him.